Alright guys, welcome back to the kingdom. Yesterday we talked about anti-mortem effects that affect meat properties. We talked about genetics, how we want ideally an animal with a high feed efficiency rate. And we talked about the age at this time of the slaughter, how that could affect tenderness. We talked about the diet, how that could affect flavor. We talked about handling, how different types of stress on the meat can affect the quality of the meat. Today we're going to talk about the microbiology of meat. We're going to talk about intoxication versus infection, the difference between viruses, bacteria, prions, and fungi. And finally, we're going to talk about factors that affect microbial growth. So have you guys done the bell work yet? To my right, left, your right. Have you ever gotten sick from eating anything, Gene? Keep pressing all these buttons. Never held one of these things before.
Not that I can remember.
No? How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I got sick one time. I threw up everywhere in this room. It was horrible. But I kind of laughed about it and I left, so.
What'd you eat?
Really bad Chinese food.
Oh yeah, so it was just a preference thing that made you throw up?
Just
or?
yacked everywhere.
Okay. What about you, Caleb?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of. You kind of threw up, or you?
No, other end.
Okay. What did you eat that caused that?
I think it was some
Chinese again, huh?
Chinese.
Gotta stay away from the Chinese.
Yeah.
What about you, Val?
I don't think.
You don't think so? You guys know of anyone that ever gotten sick from eating? Eat anything? You ever heard of anyone getting any types of illnesses? Or Caleb? If you guys could pay attention up here, it'd help us out a lot. So you guys don't know of anyone getting sick from any types of meat other than Chinese food. That's it.
Chinese food's pretty bad.
Okay, we'll come back to that then. Caleb, I know you have a lot of experience with sheep and stuff, right? So, you recognize this?
It's like I had a rough day.
Potentially?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a couple of different things.
Like what?
Lice would be one thing. There could be a bacterial problem. There could be the animal had a temperature, stress. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that potentially.
Okay.
Bad hair day.
So, I think one thing we can agree on is that something caused the sheep to inflict that upon itself, right?
Yes.
Like a itchy sensation, perhaps?
Itchy. Yes.
Well, the one thing that bacteria, prions, fungi have in common is they have to contaminate the meat in some way. So what are some sources of contamination in animals and meat products? Think of like the actual physical, tangible things that can contaminate your food. Anything, just
Parasites.
parasites.
Bacteria.
Well, that's some of the things we're going to talk about specifically. I'm thinking more general things. What contaminates your food? All right, let's talk about handling procedures. So, where does your animal live at, typically?
In the barn.
Okay, and do you just let it hang out there by itself and don't even worry about maintaining it at all, or do you go out there and
You clean.
you clean it, you trim it technically, right? So we can start with equipment. And I gave you one. In the environment where you keep it. Alright guys, come on, this is easy.
Could it be contaminated through the slaughtering process?
Yeah, equipment, yeah, that's a good one though. I was actually gonna wrap up with that, Caleb, but these all happen through humans, through the slaughtering, the processing. What about the actual physical parts of the animal? Gene?
How with their environment, how clean it is.
Yeah. Think of the animal though. What on the animal could contaminate the meat?
If they had bacteria or fungal or they brain rot.
Hair or wool?
Hair.
And
So we'll say hide, feathers,
feet.
hooves, feet. Anything else that you guys can think of that's a physical threat to these guys getting contaminated?
What about other animals?
Other animals, yeah. can go with environment, I'd say. What about us? Caretakers, employees. And there's a big, there's one thing that really is known to transfer diseases quite readily, Caleb. And it's something that you talked about at the beginning of the period that you may not want to talk about, but something gross, something nasty. Yeah. So stool is a common carrier of disease. So, what about the inner components of an animal? Is there any way that we could? What'd you say?
Guts.
The guts, yeah. And what would have to be happening with the guts in order for them to even be able to contaminate? Just very general, don't even think too hard.
Is there something in it?
Yeah, something in it, an infection. And we can have a blood infection or a tissue infection. And kind of going along this, have you guys ever tenderized meat before?
Mechanical or with like, there's multiple different processes.
Okay. And what's one of the processes that you can use?
You stick it,
Injection.
Injection.
stick it through this machine and a whole bunch of these like little knives that come through, like poke it.
Exactly.
Prod it.
Poking it. So, what do you think could happen? Or how does poking meat relate to transfer of disease in an animal?
If there's one, if like you stick a piece of meat through that's contaminated, and then it gets the knives dirty, and you stick another piece of meat through, then it's gonna, the knives are gonna contaminate the second piece of meat, and then it's gonna contaminate the whole piece of meat because you're going inside.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Even I'll talk more about that in a second, actually. So good job thinking of these things, guys, to get us rolling here. Back to your little sheep example here. So you said it could be lice, it could be some type of bacteria. This is actually, it's a picture of a disease called scabies. It's like, it's caused by a prion, and it makes the sheep feel itchy sensation all over, and other types of prions are actually mad cow disease. Caleb, have you ever had a sheep that had scabies before?
No, because then I wouldn't have sheep anymore.
Why's that?
Because they come in, they test your whole entire flock, and anything that could potentially be a character, they destroy.
Really? Huh? That's
Really.
interesting. See, I never raised sheep, so I don't know the technicalities of the business, but does anybody have a guess of what this might be?
Bacteria.
Which one?
It is bacteria. Make sure you guys understand, or try to understand that there's a difference between bacteria and viruses, okay? But this is a bacteria. And do you have a guess of what it might be?
Which picture?
This is the actual like microscopic view. This is just meat products that it may come from.
Equal.
Not E. coli. Another very common one though. The most common one actually.
Salmonella.
Yeah, this is salmonella. And which one of these pictures would you guys eat any of these?
Raw.
Yeah.
What's the bottom picture?
The bottom one, does anyone know what this is? This is like ready to eat right here.
It's like a type of sushi.
Sushi.
It's not sushi, this is beef right here. This is just an egg and the rest is irrelevant, but have you ever heard of beef tartare?
Yeah.
Have you heard of tuna tartare, or they have scallop ceviche, which is like the same thing? But the thing is, with these dishes, they all have some type of like acidity to them, like lemon or lime, and that kind of like in a way cooks the meat, makes it a little bit more safe to eat. Why would ground beef be more dangerous to eat than like a raw steak?
Because it's all mixed up.
What do you mean?
Like, it's ground up, so it's from a whole bunch of different areas.
Exactly.
And that's
Well-
more air exposure
Not even from one animal necessarily, right?
for multiple animals.
Yeah, it could be from Val, Caleb, Mike, and you all together, and one of you guys could have something.
Did you just make a reference to cannibalism?
It was an analogy to ground beef to humans. But so yeah, what about raw chicken? You can eat a raw steak. This is you know filet mignon, right? So a beef tenderloin is essentially a filet mignon like sliced up. This is like thin sliced filet mignon, and then it's seasoned with the acidity or whatever. You can eat this, but this it needs like a higher heat temperature to kill the bacteria that could be inside it. Whereas the beef, the heat can penetrate it more easily than can the chicken. Sorry. Okay. And you guys have seen this in your fridge, I'm sure. Mike, I know you've seen this at the house, man. Huh?
Moldy cheese.
Yeah, that is moldy cheese. Here's some moldy bread. And if you notice with mold, you can see it with the naked eye, right? You don't need a microscope to look at it. And does anyone know what this is? We're talking about mold and fungi.
Is it mold outside?
It's not, it's a microscopic view.
No.
So like some kind of tissue.
Let me show you. So this is what I just showed you, all those branches. It's even more close-up view. And this is actually how fungus grow. This is like the equivalent, I wouldn't say equivalent actually, but similar to a stem in plants. This is soil. This is organic matter. These could be bacteria, these little dots here. These are like the things on the bottom of fungus that protrude into the soil, and that's how the fungus gets nutrients. You've heard of mycorrhizal fungi, right? They like bore those hyphae, that's what they're called, hyphae, into like tree roots. And that's how they get, it's like a symbiotic relationship between the fungus and the tree, so. So yeah, that's some fungus action, contaminating food, and I don't know what I'm doing with this PowerPoint. Okay, this is a virus, Caleb, and what do you notice about the two babies on the right there? You don't notice any differences?
There's one that has its eyes closed. And one
Okay, yeah, that's a difference, definitely. Don't even think too hard. Like, what do you see straight up on those babies? Gene, what do you see on the babies?
You're trying to make me make a racial slur.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not at all. No, I'm not at all. Like, you really can tell me those babies look exactly the same. Can you?
Let's try to do it together.
All right.
One's kind of like an orange.
This one. Thank you. One's orange or yellower. That's called jaundice, and that's from hepatitis, and that's when your eyes get yellow, your skin gets yellow. Thanks a lot, Mike. If I had candy right now, I would sling you one real quick. But this is a picture of a virus, and if you notice, it has this sheath here, and it's surrounded by proteins that protect it from heat, cold, essentially whatever ailment you throw at it. It has a DNA up top, but one thing that separates it from a bacteria is the bacteria, see here, they kind of have like, they're surrounded by something. The bacteria is a cell. These are cell walls. And viruses, they're not cells. They're just like, I guess you could call it a structure.
It looks like a bad transformer.
Yeah, it does look pretty mean, huh? So, like we were talking about the scabies, Caleb, and that's caused by a prion. And prion is actually directly translates to protein infection. And the cool thing about prions is they don't have DNA. They're essentially just a strand of protein that's unraveled and it's able to interact with different biological processes, I guess you could say. And they enter your skin through cuts and lesions. All ailments caused by prions are untreatable. And Caleb, if you remember, I said scabies and I said another prion-induced ailment too. Do you remember what that was?
Not cow disease.
Yes. And like I said, they're both untreatable, so pretty scary stuff for a little prion. Also, another thing I want to mention before I show you guys these slides, Gene, is that they're arranged in order of size from smallest to largest too, okay? So prions are, you need a high-powered electron microscope to even see them. Viruses, we talked about the hepatitis, the jaundice, yellowing of the skin. They're smaller than bacteria, larger than prions. They have DNA. They have the protein coat protecting them. One thing about viruses is they require a living host to survive. So you can't have hepatitis in your raw steak unless somebody puts it there through fecal contamination or some other means. So they need a living host to survive and thrive. They can be single or multicellular, and yeah, like we said, it's transmitted mostly through stool. So, and lastly, we have fungi. They're single-celled too. They can be seen with the naked eye, like Mike's moldy fridge bread. They're similar to plants. You can make comparisons, but ultimately, it's all about that hyphae, and plants have stems and leaves and